Another week. It's almost the weekend. So, for today's class, we are going to continue our last part of building an argument. So, you all have been doing very well so far with building your arguments. So, we started, I can't believe it has already been almost 2 months, but we started about 6 weeks ago thinking about arguments with our conversation about whether college athletes should be paid or not. And now, look, we are almost to the end of our parts of the argument. So we're going to talk about the fifth and final part to building an argument. Oh, wait. So before we get started with the acknowledgement section, I just wanted to answer a quick question because I have been reviewing your homework, and for last week, I wanted you all to go back to what you had written so far. So, your claim, your reason, evidence, and your warrant that we drafted in class. Go back to those and just review them and make any edits or suggestions. So, I did have someone ask just if you were supposed to change or rewrite your different parts that you have so far, if you were supposed to rewrite those or to just change them to what I suggested. And so for this exercise, most of you, when you turn something in, I'll make small corrections. Maybe I will change a word in the sentence. And then sometimes I leave a comment where it'll be a little paragraph or a few sentences where I might make a suggestion about either something that you could add or maybe something that you could change. And so I just wanted you to take those comments and put them into your work. And so if I maybe made a suggestion that, oh, this was a good sentence for your evidence, but it's probably more of a reason and not evidence, then what you could do is you could actually just take that you had, the evidence that you provided, and just add that to your reason and either make a new reason with that, or you could just add it to the reason you already had. And so that's what I mean by just taking some of those ideas or suggestions that maybe I left you in a comment, or if I changed a word or helped correct a sentence, those should be the ones that you should try to use. Because in 2 weeks, so the last class of the summer, what we'll do is we will present our arguments. So at that point, I know we've been talking about them a lot and you all have given examples in class, but what I want to do is have each person actually present their argument, and then myself and your classmates can then talk about whether they agree or maybe you changed their minds. Maybe they didn't agree at first, but now they do agree because of the great argument you made. And so that's what we'll be doing in our last class. And so these each week that we're doing a little bit more in building our argument, that's why now I'm wanting you to think about all of those suggestions or changes that I put in your homework and then add those or make those to your final version that you'll present to the class. Does anyone have a question about that? Did I answer that for everyone of what we're going to be doing and how you should use those suggestions and changes in the homework? Okay. And if you do have any more questions, always feel free. I know this question that was asked, someone replied to a comment and asked a question. And so I do get those. So please, if you do have a question that maybe you don't want to say now in class, you can always send me a message or a comment in Google Classroom. Okay, so let's get started with today's topic. So we're moving on to the acknowledgement, which is the final part of our argument. So, what is the acknowledgement? Let's take a look. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. So, the acknowledgement. So, before we define or talk about what the acknowledgement is, let's first think back to our rules of making a good claim. So, what was one of our rules for making a good claim? That was one of the first things we talked about. How can we make a good claim? All right. Zach, do you mind reading the second bullet, the kind of indented bullet? Can you see that? There you go. The audience.
The audience should be able to agree or disagree with your claim.
Okay, so that was the first part, is that our audience should be able to agree or disagree with our claim. And so we don't make claims that are already believed by the majority of people or that are factual. Like we wouldn't want to make a claim that the sky is blue or that our that the ground can be dirty. These are things that everyone knows, and no one would disagree with that. And so that was our basic rule of a claim, is that it should be something that someone can agree or disagree with. All right. So when it comes to the acknowledgement talks about what those disagreements are likely to be. So the acknowledgement is really where you talk about what the other side would say. And so let's take, for example, our first topic this summer. Should college athletes be paid? So one side would say, yes, college athletes should be paid. But the other side would say, no, they should not be paid. So that's the other side of the argument. And so when we do an acknowledgement, we are stating what the other side may think and what the other side may disagree with when we state our claim or when we make an argument. So it's really acknowledging or calling out or basically stating what the other side of the argument is, what the opposite view would be. And so, what it does is the reason why we do an acknowledgement, you might think, why, when I'm making an argument, why would I want to talk about the other side and what the other people may think? Why would I want to bring that up? You might think that. But when we acknowledge that there is another side and we validate that there is another side, which means that we say that the other side is important and that you know that people may disagree with you. When we do that, it builds trust with our audience. Because think about that. If someone is wanting you to believe something, it probably helps if they at least acknowledge that other thoughts are out there, that there is another side to the story. And so if someone says, "Okay, this is what I think, but I know other people may think differently," that gives you a little more credit. It helps your audience and who you're speaking to. It helps them trust you because they know that, okay, he knows that there's another side to this. And what he's doing is he is telling us his side and giving support and evidence of why his side is valid and correct. And so it can help build trust. Also, something else that it does is it allows you to predict issues that might weaken your argument and respond. So let's think about that word predict. Does anyone know what that word predict means? Can anyone take a guess of what predict means? That it allows you to predict issues? Nathan, what do you think? What do you think predict means?
Uh, I don't know the word means.
Okay. Okay. So when we predict something, we think about what will happen in the future. So a prediction is what will happen in the future, or we think about what will happen in the future. So for instance, let's think about some of your claims. Okay, so Zach, you had a claim that the U.S. Men's basketball team would win the gold medal in the Olympics. That was your claim. And so that is a prediction. It's not anymore because we know the result. But when you first wrote your claim, the men's basketball team had not won yet, but you were predicting that they would win. You were looking into the future and saying this is what I think will happen. And so when we say that acknowledging the other side of your argument, thinking about what other people think and what the other side is, when we do that, it helps us predict where people might disagree with us. And so when you give an argument, if you really want to have the best argument and you really want to convince people that your claim is correct, one of the best ways to do that is to predict what issues or what problems they may have with your claim. And so that's what acknowledgments do. They help us to think about, okay, so I think the men's basketball team will win gold in the Olympics. What do other people think? And why do they think that? If I have that in my mind before I start to make my argument, I can pick better evidence. I can really decide what reasons and the warrants that I want to use for my argument because I know what the other side will say and I know what they may think about this. And so that's why the acknowledgement is so important to our argument. Okay, so now let's take a look at what this actually looks like. How do we build an acknowledgement? What do we say? How do we talk about an acknowledgement in our argument? So some things to consider. Let's start with what we're going to think about when we're writing. So when we are stating the other side of our argument, we want to make sure that it's a fair, that we do so fairly. So, just as if someone was talking to you or they were describing maybe how you felt about something, you wouldn't want them to tell a lie or you wouldn't want them to say something that wasn't true or maybe say something that wasn't what you were trying to say. Maybe they say something and it's much more extreme or it's much more harsh than you actually meant to say it. So you would want them to fairly state what the other side is. So that's something that we want to make sure that we do. We want to fairly state what the other side is doing. Also, let's look for parts of the other side that actually seem right and try to acknowledge valid concerns. So what this means when we say that is when we look at the other side, we want to try to see what parts are right Because when we think about acknowledging what the other side of our argument is, we want to think about what parts of what they would say are true. So, for instance, I'm going to stay on Zach's example now. For instance, other people may think, let's just say France. That's who was in the gold medal game. So, let's just say in that example, other people thought France would win the gold medal. And so they probably have reasons why they think France would win. Maybe because the players were better, maybe because they had more less injuries. Maybe they had less injuries than the US team. Maybe a lot of people on the US team had gotten injured, and so they had less injuries. There could be a variety of reasons. But if we think about which ones are right, which parts of their argument are valid, are correct, that can help us choose our evidence more wisely and choose better evidence to support our claim against those. And so that's what I mean when I say look for parts of the other side that actually seem right. And then once we acknowledge or we state what the other arguments are, that's when we start to use our reasons, our evidence, and our warrant to support our side against the other side. So this is where, in Zach's example, he may start to say, well, yes, France may have some good players, but the US team has better players for this reason. Or, well, yes, the French team has good players, but the US team has won the gold medal several times in Olympic history. So they are better used. Their coaches are more used to playing under such extreme pressure, so they'll probably win. That helps us build our evidence. It helps us support our claim if we know what the other side is, what the other side of the argument is. Okay, so that's a little bit about what we want to think about when we're building an acknowledgement. Now let's look at how an acknowledgement works. What is the sentence structure? Okay, so here I've left some examples of some phrasing and some words that we use when stating an acknowledgement. So this is maybe a good screen if you do take screenshots or you make notes. This is probably a good one to keep note of when you're building your acknowledgement. But these are some ways that we start to build a sentence of acknowledgement. And so, as you can see, there's some dot dot dots, which is where you're going to add information to these phrases. This is where you're going to make these phrases or these sentences, you're going to make them apply and fit your claim in your argument. So, let's take a closer look. All right. So, I'm just going to first start with the first example here. Is it true that, however, therefore? Okay, so let's look at this. When we're building our acknowledgement, if we start with, it is true that, the next thing that we're going to say is we're actually going to state what that other side is. So if we have an argument, this is where we're going to say, okay, it is true that, and now this is where you say what the other side of the argument is. Now, once you say what the other side is, then you can use the word however, and this is where you talk about your reasons, your evidence, and or your warrant, and why even though the other side may be correct or the other side may have a point or may have a valid issue, you explain then why your reason, your evidence, and your warrant are better or are better used for this situation and why your claim is still correct. And then once we get to the therefore section, this is where you restate your claim and you restate what the main point of your argument is. So we'll just say it is true that we'll state the other side. However, we'll talk about our reasons, evidences, and warrants. Therefore, restate your claim. Okay. Let's look at that in a real life example, so that we can see how that actually looks and how it works. So, okay. So, example number 1. All right. Joshua, could you read our claim and reason?
Every country should have laws requiring people to wear seat belts in cars because it is one of the best ways to save lives in crashes.
All right. Very good, Joshua. Okay. So now how about Robert? Can you read the evidence?
Since 1975, seat belts are estimated to have saved free free
100.
374,000
Yep.
and ton and 276 lives. The latest 2020 data shows that seatbelt use has risen to 90.3% and deaths have dropped 38.5%.
Good. Good. Okay. So that's a lot of statistics there just about why seatbelts are the best. It explains why we think seatbelts are the best ways, as one of the best ways to save lives in crashes. Okay, Nathan, how about our warrant?
It is the government's responsibility to protect its citizens.
All right. Okay. So now let's take this example and build an acknowledgement. So first, what do we think other people would say about wearing seatbelts? Let's think about that. If you didn't want to wear seatbelts or you believed that seatbelts weren't very safe, what are some ways that people could think? What is the other side? What is the other side of that argument? Robert, what do you think? What's the other side? The other side of the argument.
Mm, uh, the other side thinks the seatbelt isn't that important.
Yeah, that they're not important. Maybe they think they don't work. Yeah, so that's what the other side would say. The other side may say that. They may think, okay, seatbelts really don't do very much. They're not very safe. Okay, so let's start there. It is true that some people are still injured or even die when using seatbelts. So remember, we are saying that that the government should make laws requiring people to wear seatbelts. And so the other side of the argument, the other people might say, well, it doesn't matter. Even if I wear a seatbelt, some people still die, so why should that be a law? It doesn't really matter. And so I might say, true. That's correct. It is true that some people are still injured or even die when using seatbelts. However, now, this is where I go back to my claim, reason, or my reason, evidence, or warrant. This is where I go back to that. However, the number of deaths would be far higher if people didn't wear them. Because think about our evidence. Our evidence shows how many hundreds of thousands of lives have been saved by seatbelts. And we also show that the deaths of in automobile crashes have dropped 38.5%. So this is showing through our evidence that the number of deaths would be far higher if people didn't wear seatbelts. And so therefore, laws requiring their use saves lives. It saves lives. So that is how we would build an acknowledgement. We look at the other side, we refer back to our evidence or our warrant or reasons, and then we restate our claim. Laws requiring their use save lives. Okay, so let's look at our second example. Let's do one more. All right. Abner, can you kick us off with the claim and reason? Could you read that for us?
Okay. Living in the countryside is healthier than living in the city because the air is cleaner.
All right. Because the air is cleaner. Okay. Joshua, our evidence, please.
Between 2018 to 2012, the average number of red alert ozone days in large cities was 47.45 days, whereas for rural areas it was only 3.84 days.
Okay. So we had 47.54 days, whereas for rural areas, it was only 3.8 days. So significantly more. We're showing in our evidence. And a red alert ozone day is when the pollution and the smog in the air is really bad and it's reached a level where it can be harmful to breathe the air because it's so polluted. And so we're saying here that in a large city, there are substantially more days that are unhealthy to go outside or to breathe the outside air because of these red alert days. And so, what's our warrant? Zach, can you read our warrant? Oh, you might be muted, Zach. It's okay. We'll come back to you, Zach. How about Robert? Take that for us. What's our warrant there?
Breathing clean, no polluted air leads to a healthier life.
Yes. Okay. So that's something that a lot of people would believe that if you're breathing clean air, that you can it's healthier. It leads to a healthier life. Okay. So let's try our acknowledgement now. So I'm using a different example. So this is one of those sentences, the sentence structures that we looked at before. So this is one of those. So here we had things to consider, and we're using the of course, nevertheless, as a result. So that's what we're going to use in this example. Okay, so let's go back to it. Okay, so our acknowledgement. Of course, living in the city has some health advantages, like better access to doctors and hospitals. So this is something that someone could say. So in this case, since our claim is that living in the countryside is healthier than living in the city because the air is cleaner, someone else might say, okay, well, the air might be cleaner, but the city also has a lot of advantages for keeping people healthy. So maybe just because the air is polluted, maybe that's not the only reason why the city is unhealthy, or can that doesn't make the city unhealthy, because there are lots of other things in the city that keep people healthy. And so I might acknowledge that. I'm going to acknowledge that. I say, of course, living in the city has some health advantages, like better access to doctors and hospitals. Nevertheless, so now we're going to use our word like however, nevertheless. These are words where we can transition into an opposing or the opposite view. Living in a city with dangerous levels of air pollution can cause more sickness and increase the need for those doctors. And so now I've given that argument against that. So they say, well, the city has better access to doctors and hospitals. But what I'm saying is that, well, due to all the air pollution, now people need doctors more. And so if I were in the countryside, I wouldn't have to have as many doctors and hospitals because I wouldn't be as sick as I am in the city. And so that gives the how we use our evidence and our warrant and our reasons to then support our claim instead of the opposite claim. And lastly, we have, as a result, living in the countryside is an overall healthier option. We go right back to our claim. Our original claim was that living in the countryside is healthier, and we restate that claim. Living in the countryside is an overall healthier option. Okay, so those are two examples of how we can build an acknowledgement. All right, so now let's get some practice with our own acknowledgments. So what I want to do first is let's think. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want everyone to take just 2 or 3 minutes and think about your claim. So the claims that you all have been working on, and I want you to think about what is the other side. If people were disagreeing with your claim, what would they say? What are some things that they would bring to your attention if they wanted to say, "Oh, you're making that claim, but I don't agree." What are the reasons, or why would they disagree with you? What are their arguments? Okay? And then I want you to also think about how your evidence, your warrant or your reason, so these things that you've already prepared, how can you use those to go against their side? Once you acknowledge that the other side exists, how does your reason, your evidence, and your warrant, or one of a combination, one or all of those things, how do those help you come back to that your side is right? Okay, so how does that disprove their claim or show that your argument is stronger? Okay, so just take 2 or 3 minutes to think about that. Just what is the other side to your argument? The arguments that you've been working on. What's the other side? How could someone else disagree? All right. And while the students just take a couple of minutes, I'll take this moment here to just speak to the observers very quickly. But next week, just some programming, I guess, programming updates. Next week, we'll be having office hours on Monday, and those office hours will be from 7:30 to 8:30 Central Time, and also on Wednesday from 7 to 8 p.m. Central Time. So we'll have 2 office hours next week. And then also, just another reminder, if you are interested in our webinar that is discussing working for any of the large online ESL companies. And so we're focusing on 4 of them. That would be VIP Kid, Magic Ears, Bling ABC, and Preply. If you're interested, if you've ever been interested in those, we're having part 2 of our webinar, which will be at 10 a.m. Central on Saturday, August 14th. And this week we'll be discussing the classroom. And so this will be where we'll talk a lot about how teaching, the actual teaching on the different platforms is different, how are requirements different, what policies do they have with how they like you to teach or what your teaching style should be to be most successful on these platforms. And so that'll be what we talk about this upcoming Saturday. The links for both office hours and the webinar are all on the observation schedule. So check out the observation schedule for those links.
Google Meet?
Yes, and that is a good point. Thank you, thank you, Luke. So, next week there will be some changes to how we invite you to any of the or to at least now, Luke. Is it just myself and Bridget, or are all the classes transitioning to Google Meets?
Just both of you.
Okay. And so for next week, if you observe either mine or Bridget's classes next week, and you can see on the observation schedule who is scheduled to teach the class. So if it's myself or Bridget, we are going to be testing a transition to using Google Meets as our platform for video. And so how that will work beginning next week is you'll have two options. One, you can either use the link, a link to my personal classroom and Bridget's personal classroom will be provided on the observation schedule. And so you can access the class directly using that link at the time of the class. Or we will also still have a Skype chat set up like we do now for the classes, but instead of starting the video in Skype, we will just be sending the link about 5 minutes before the class. We will send the link just as I do with materials or like Bridget does with her materials. We will send that in the chat and you can then click the link from the Skype chat to join our Google Meets section. Google Meet Classroom. So we are hoping that Google Meet it does offer a little bit more as far as whiteboard capabilities, and it's a little bit easier to use some of our presentation software like Prezi and those types of things. And so we're going to try it out. So hopefully that will work out for everyone. So again, you can either click and access our classroom with our personal link from the observation schedule, or you can still come to the Skype chat and we will provide the link there. Okay, so let's go back and talk a little bit more about our class. Okay, so let's start with Joshua. So Joshua, you are, go ahead and tell us what your claim is. Remind us what your claim is again. And then let's talk about the other side. What would be the other or the opposite argument for your claim?
Okay, so my claim is nowadays more teenagers would rather use Instagram than Facebook. And my acknowledgement is there are still many teenagers posting their daily life in Facebook.
Okay. So the other side or the opposite side of that argument is that hey, there are still a lot of teens that use Facebook, even though many do go with Instagram. There are still a lot of teens who prefer Facebook. Okay, very good. All right, so now let's go to Zach. So Zach, remind us of your claim, in which we've been talking. We used yours as an example tonight, but what's the other side of potentially your argument? Let's talk about yours.
Maybe someone think The Americans lose the warm-up match the, uh, this Olympics.
Oh, okay. So that's actually a really great acknowledgement of the other side of that argument. So what you're saying is that the other side, or people who don't believe or who didn't believe that, might say, well, the US has already lost the warm-up match, which could be a good sign that they're not going to win this year because they already lost a warm-up match. That's a very good acknowledgement. That's very good. All right. How about you, Nathan? State your claim and what's the other side?
And my claim is boys should be allowed to wear skirts.
Hmm.
And the other side is when you see the boy wear skirt on the street, you may a little you may think that a little curious and a little strange.
Okay. So your other side is that, okay, you're saying that, oh, okay, well, boys should be able to wear skirts, but the other side might say, yes, but then when you see them walking around, it causes people to wonder what's going on, to maybe think, it may seem strange to some people. Maybe it causes a distraction or an uproar because now people are thinking about what the person is wearing instead of maybe focusing on other things, especially maybe in school or in other places that might be a distraction. So that could be the other side. That could be the other side. So that's a good acknowledgement as well for your argument. Okay, Robert, your turn.
My claim is Edge is better than Chrome, and the other side may say the Chrome can connect to other Google products easily, and why not? I don't use Chrome. Yes.
Ah, yes. Okay, so I like your other side too. And the reason why yours is a really good one is just because I know what you've written as your reasons. And so we're saying that or your warrant, I should say. This is a good example of how you can use your warrant to be a counter to your other side because you're saying that, the performance is what Chrome uses, a lot of performance, a lot of RAM from your device, from your computer. And so that affects how you feel about it. That makes your whole experience of using it worse. But the other side might say, well, that might be true, but I can easily plug Chrome in, and it does a lot of things with other web applications that I'm using. Maybe my email, maybe Google Slides, Google Docs, Google Classroom even, and so that might be a reason why that they would. So that's a good other side as well. All right, and last, do we get everyone? Let's see, Zach, Joshua, Robert, yeah, Nathan. Okay, so good job with that. Now we have just 5 minutes left, and in this last 5 minutes, what I wanted you to do is again, this might be a good if you can take a screenshot of this. This could be a good thing to have, just so that you know some of our wording and vocabulary that we can use. And so these are the different options. And then I want to give you one more. So I can go back to if someone still needs a little more time with that, but I want to give you one more option as well, because this is also a good one to take a screenshot of because this tells you what to put in those dots. So this is how you should fill each of those dots. So you have several options to use, and then this is the information that you're going to include when you do it. The white lettering is the information you'll include. So take note of that or screenshot that, so that, and I will also, when I assign your homework for this next week, because your homework, if you haven't guessed, your homework will be to actually draft up a full acknowledgement. So here in class, we've already talked about what the other side of your argument is. Now I want you to actually build out a full acknowledgement where we will talk about the other side, the however, and then the therefore when we can restate our claim. And so for homework, go ahead and draft that fully, and I will take a look whenever after you turn it in. Okay, so let's just go back. I'm trying to get, I think I went back too far. I'm going to, there we go. Okay, and so here are those sentence templates one more time, just in case you need to still take another screenshot of those. All right. So before we end class today, are there any questions about the acknowledgement? I think from so far, you all have a pretty good idea of what we're going to do in our acknowledgement. So just take a stab at it. But any questions? Okay. Okay, I look forward to seeing these acknowledgments. And so next week, just a preview, as I mentioned at the beginning of class, 2 weeks from now, you all will be presenting your full arguments to the class and we'll have a little discussion. So we'll see what some of your other classmates think, or and see if your argument convinced them of your claim. And so that will be in 2 weeks. Next week, we will spend some time just reviewing some of these concepts. So we'll go back and just kind of, so that we get a good grasp on what each of these are. And then I'll also take a look next week at your final drafts of your entire argument so that you're ready for class on 2 weeks from now. Okay?
Could you give me a minute? Could you stop sharing? I would like to ask students if they have ever used Google Meet before.
Okay, give me 1 second. Let me stop. Okay.
Thank you. All right, let's change it to large group. Okay, students, have you ever used Google Meet before? Raise your hand if you have. Great, great. So I will provide a link, and next week we will move our class to Google Meet, okay? No problem, they have used Google Meet before. Yes, because at schools we use Google Meet a lot, so it's not a problem.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess next week we'll be moving out of Skype world and into Google Meet world. So now Robert's going to have a more difficult time with his argument, because now we're going to be using another Google application, and that might go to the other side. So
Okay, let's unmute our microphone and say thank you, Teacher Quentin.
Thank you, teacher.
Thank you,
Quentin.
teacher
Thank you, Teacher
Quentin.
Quentin.
Thank you.
see you next week. Good job, you all. Good job. Keep it up.
Here, bye-bye.
Bye bye.